is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would wish to comment? I think we have somebody. Would you please introduce yourself for the record? And here you go.
Good afternoon. I am Kellum DeForest, and as you may or may not know, the street tree ordinance is going to be presented to the City Council this coming Tuesday, July 28th. And but Title 15, Chapter 20, and to excuse me, we can, it omits a requirement in the ordinance that the removal of trees in El Pueblo Viejo and on landmark and structures of merit sites be reviewed by the Historic Landmark Commission. This is missing from both Chapter 20, which deals with city property, and Chapter 24, which deals with private property. The mission is egregious, and in where they cite in 1524.020 the title prohibitions for removing trees, and the only consideration given are for setback or parking lot trees and for those designated as historic or specimen trees. Please see that the new ordinance protects trees in El Pueblo Viejo and those on landmark sites by authorizing their review by this commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Kellum. I assume staff may have something to say about that, or? No? Okay. Esmeralda, do you want to say something?
Yeah. Did we have a kind of a recommendation to do? Didn't we recommend it? I don't have a good memory of our commission's recommendations, but didn't we recommend that that was really important to put that clause in the ordinance that trees
when we were
on
talking
that,
to the streets,
the
city street committee, or
that
whatever.
all the designated properties, before they do anything with their trees, they need to come to the landmarks.
Yeah, well, I thought so. Yes. Pardon me? The street trees?
I just walked in, so I'm sorry.
Street trees on, I don't know what the proposed changes are, so I can't.
Perhaps
Maybe
Mr. Limon knows.
Limon could.
Here, Mr. Limon can answer that.
I think you're this is Jaime Limon, Senior Planner. I think you're asking me about the tree preservation ordinance amendments.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I just jumped in late. Yes, they are scheduled for next Tuesday, and we can probably get a draft or a copy of the staff report, which would include the amendments, and I think Mr. Adams would be interested in getting that, because it does have additional enforcement capabilities that we're going to allow for the maintenance of landscaping and tied to specific types of projects. And it's primarily focused on commercial, industrial, and multifamily. And so it would give the ability of the city to enforce on tree removals or major landscaping changes that occur on these properties, and would mandate that the property owner be responsible for maintenance of those elements, which I think is a large step in what we've been seeking for a long time, which is to ensure that the landscape plans that you all approve are maintained on these properties. We've always had that ability for El Pueblo Viejo properties because those it's much broader authority to any exterior change can come before you. But outside the El Pueblo Viejo district, we believe that these changes will be helpful. Also, as you recall, when we introduced these concepts to you about a year ago, we will be actually incorporating references to a new fine system. Now, those fines will be coming in separately, and you'll have an ability to look at that fine structure also. So this will be also an introduction to the idea that if you take out a tree in the city that's of a certain size, there will be a fine levied against the property owner as well as the tree company that removes the actual tree. So good news.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to get some clarification. Mr. DeForest brought up the fact that HLC, it looks like the way the ordinance, the way that he read it anyway, HLC is left out of kind of reviewing trees to be removed in the district. What do you know about that issue?
No, that's not correct. Actually, we're actually going to make it very clear on the purview authority because right now there is some confusion that has occurred, as you remember, about whether the parks has jurisdiction over deciding the tree replacement issue, as to whether they are the lead agency, as to whether the HLC is involved. So we actually are going to clarify in the ordinance for the first time that this commission will provide a recommendation to the Parks and Rec Commission regarding tree removals, and there'll be a process so we don't bounce between commissions, and there'll be an authority there given. And also the communication that you requested will also be provided that if they make a decision, you will become aware of that decision also.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification. Yes. Yes?
Offer to attend that meeting for that item at City
Well, I
Council?
think that would be appreciated.
Okay.
It is scheduled at the ordinance committee, so there'll be a meeting at probably at noon, 12:30, and I'll give you that information.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Jaime.
Mr. Adams. Next item of business will be approval of the minutes.
Second.
Are there any revisions or corrections or additions? All those in favor of approving these minutes as they stand? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Perfect job. Get
Sharp abstained?
Oh, Sharp abstain.
Peugeot.
Yes.
Yes.
Next item of business is the consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair. Item A, 321 East Cannon Perdido Street was indefinitely continued to the staff hearing officer with positive comments. Item B, 509 State Street was postponed 2 weeks at the applicant's request. Item C, at 924 Anacapa Street was referred up to the full board today at 4 p.m. Item D, 536 State Street was continued 4 weeks to August 19th. Item E, 811 Santa Barbara Street was final approval as submitted. Item F, 125 Remetto Road was final approval as submitted. And item G, 834 State Street was continued 2 weeks with comments to the consent calendar. And those were, hold on that for a second. They were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp with the exception of item E, which was reviewed by Commissioner Adams, and item G, which was reviewed by Chair Naylor.
Thank you. All those in favor of ratifying these?
I'll make a, who made the
I'm
motion?
sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Next item of business is announcements and requests by applicants.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Drury will be absent from today's meeting, and I thought I added something to that. I think anyway, ignore me. Regarding an email sent to you guys a couple weeks ago, Gary Robinson of the Natural History Museum wants to schedule a site visit with all of you at one time to review the location of the temporary butterfly exhibit for future possible permanent structure and how that will fit into a master plan for the whole campus. So he requested a site visit between 11 and 4 p.m. on Thursday, July 30th, or any other Thursday in August. So I had emailed that to you so you could all check your calendars and come in with a date. Yes.
So I didn't get that email. Did everybody else get the email? I didn't get that. No, I don't think anyone's gotten that email.
You're kidding.
No.
I will. That's pretty strange. I asked you to check your calendars because we would be deciding on a date, so maybe, I don't know. Well, maybe it didn't get sent. So he would like everybody to come over, the board actually of the museum wants everybody to come over for one visit and walk, because you had made that request, if you recall, when the planner Pete Lawson was here. They had tried to get what was the deal? They wanted the butterfly exhibit. They were proposing kind of a more permanent building, and you said no, you need to come in with a real structure fitting into the whole campus master plan. That was your request. And so now they want your advice on whether or not the present temporary location would be a good location for the permanent structure. So, a Thursday, August 4th, between, Thursday, July 30th, between 11 and 4, or any Thursday in August. So if you could email me or call me back, and you can go check your calendars, then I will let Mr. Robinson know.
Thank you.
For those of us who work and have regular schedules, early in the morning is better. Like at 8 o'clock, so about 8:30 we go back and proceed. Just,
Okay.
we have to break the day in half. It's a little bit more,
Right.
asking a little bit more, perhaps too
So
much.
is that everybody's opinion then?
I think so.
So 8:30? 8:30?
Yeah, I have the same issue.
Great. 8:30, is that okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the same way we did it this in Athens.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And then just a reminder, August 4th, the Ordinance Committee will be discussing and considering a draft ordinance to implement the Mills Act. I had announced that a couple weeks ago, and I believe Mr. Lamona has an announcement.
Back again. Don't know if this commission remembers that in November of 2007, we had a training session, and I think it was mostly having to do with ex parte communications and of that nature and the Brown Act. And at that time, I mentioned to you that I was very interested in hearing from this commission regarding establishing a 5-year goals and strategy plan, and that I would be drafting a draft of that to begin discussions with this commission. And the reason we're doing this, I don't know if Louise remembers this, is because John Pittman was a very strong advocate of establishing this long-term vision for the commission and to determine whether or not we would follow through on our commitments for historic preservation. And I think it would be beneficial for our general plan update and all these discussions about having a conservation element prepared to understand what this commission would like to see. And I also would like to get an opportunity to check in with you all on the status of our survey and districting plan, because I think there's some conflicts and obstacles that have been created. And I know I've spoken to Fermina about maybe pursuing the districting plans in different manner to try to pursue at least one of them rather than try to combine them all. So we do need some direction, and so I'd like to propose that I have a commissioner or two work with me to try to prepare something suitable for a draft to be presented to the commission. I think that would probably be the best way to iron out some of the language. And so I don't know who this chair could appoint that would assist me.
Ms.
in
Murray,
that.
I volunteer
stepping
myself.
forward.
And again, I think what would eventually happen with this long-term plan would be a presentation to the City Council with respect to how we would go about implementing some of these goals. And I'm sure Council will be very interested in hearing from you also on the status of our historic preservation program.
Is there no other volunteer?
Well, I could work with one.
I would work with one, and can you, Commissioner
No.
Peugeot, and I was going to say, if you could send me sort of more detail about timeline and all that, let me check my
Sure.
schedule, and I'll see if I can
Yeah, I don't anticipate this being a very long commitment. I would think it would be a 1 or 2 meetings where we could go over the structure. And then we'd also have an ability for this commission to comment and expand on any more strategies or long-term ideas regarding historic preservation.
I think I can put
Okay.
myself on it then.
Okay.
All right, so that's Commissioner Peugeot, Commissioner Murray, and me.
Allison.
Commissioner Murray and me.
Oh, great.
Great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Okay, the next item, business? Oh, yes.
I think everyone but me got an invitation to some kind of thing, which I'm expecting to be at home today. And as usual, I have the sign-up sheet, and so I'm going to pass this around, and I expect everyone to sign up to bring something to our event on August 16th, okay? And as I say down here, if you do not sign up to bring something, I will be sure to call you.
That's why you're doing this. Thank you. Are there any other announcements? If not, the next item is subcommittee reports. Are there? Oh,
I'm going to be
Murray.
stepping down from item 1, 421 East Coast. That's what
I had added that to my sheet to announce, and I printed it out and didn't pick it up off the printer. Thank you.
Are there any possible ordinance violations?
I have
Oh.
something I'd like to ask about. I noticed that there's a small, very small building going up in the parking lot side of the 1100 block of State Street behind the place that's going out of business that has rugs and all kinds of stuff. It's a small building, and I didn't know if it had gone through consent or if it had.
Just waiting for you to finish your sentence. Yeah. Right.
Or
Was
if
that it?
anybody had heard about this.
So is this the just a couple doors down from Joe's Cafe?
No, the 1100 block.
Oh, the 1100 block.
It's just below the San Marcos building.
Oh, they
Right
they
next to
had,
that.
Yeah. Oh, behind. Yes, they had a trash enclosure approved.
Oh, this is a mighty big trash enclosure.
Well, I don't know.
Yes, I remember
I'm just saying
seeing
they got a building permit, and if it's bigger than what the plans show, then I'm sure the inspectors will
Okay.
say this
It
is not
looks to
according
me
plan.
like a storage building, but
I can't remember the scope of the work, but it did come to HLC
Okay.
and get
Yes,
approved.
I remember seeing, I remember that
Yeah.
location and,
Okay.
and all of that.
just asking.
Okay, get out there and look. I'm going to go to the first discussion item, which is catch basin inlet storm drain screens. We've done that.
When we get to item number 2, can I do a little preamble to the information we need first?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon. My name is Cameron Benson, and I'm the Creeks Division Manager for the city. And I am here today because your staff, Jaime Limon, and the Community Development Director, Paul Casey, requested that we come in and inform your commission about a city water quality project that we're working on for creek and ocean water quality. We've been working on for several years, actually. This project began back in 2005. And just a little bit of background, we prepared a brief staff report on this, but just a little bit of background. We just were talking about trash enclosures. We've got trash in the streets and getting into the storm drains, into the creeks, and out to the ocean. And not only does the trash have an aesthetic impact on the city and those locations, but it also has adverse consequences for water quality as well as vector control. And as you probably know, when water and trash and other debris goes into those catch basins up at the street level and down into the storm drains, it goes to the creeks and out to the beaches untreated and unfiltered, and we're not capturing any of that litter in any other way. The city currently spends about $100,000 a year to have trash removed from the city creeks. Spends several $100,000 a year to remove trash from the beaches in the city. And then the city also runs a street sweeping program with an annual budget of around $1 million. So it's a big problem. Of course, it would be great if people would just not litter. Then we'd save all that money. We wouldn't have the associated problems. We do litter outreach. We're going to continue to do that kind of work. But until that happens, we need to do something to address the problem of all the trash getting into the creeks. In addition to that, from a regulatory standpoint, the Regional Water Quality Control Board has identified trash as what they call a pollutant of concern in Santa Barbara and at our creeks and beaches. And in other communities, their water boards have actually mandated the installation of these screens on catch basins throughout those communities to prevent trash from entering their creeks and beaches. And so with the potential for that regulatory mandate on the horizon for Santa Barbara, the Creeks Division has programmed the installation of these screens into our capital improvement program. So as part of our capital improvement program, we had planned to do some of these each year going out the next 6 years, and actually at the rate we would project it would have taken us probably 15 years to get through the city. And the reason we were doing it that way was so that if we start now, by the time the regulatory agency is mandating it, we would be done or mostly done, and we wouldn't be faced with a $2 million bill and no money to pay for it. We would just have a little ways to go, and we'd be able to finish that project. I also wanted to let you all know that the city has applied for grant funding for this project, and we haven't received an answer on that. We're hopeful that our application will be successful, and so we can leverage the city's Measure B funds on this project and with some outside funding. But since you all are the design experts, I wanted to really talk about the design and how we ended up with the design we have for this project. We had 4 primary objectives we were looking at and coming up with the design. The first is that it be effective at keeping trash and other debris from getting into the storm drains. The second was the cost, and not just the fabrication and installation cost, but the big cost for something like this, and for a lot of public works items, is the long-term maintenance for something. These are designed to last for 25 years at a minimum, and the maintenance costs can often exceed the cost of fabricating and installing them. The third thing is that they're efficient, and that we developed a design that coordinated itself with other city programs, most notably the street sweeping program. And then fourth, that the design would be safe and not cause flooding. I mean, after all, these catch basin inlets are there to capture water and prevent flooding throughout the city, so we needed to have something that was not going to block the flood flows from getting into the storm drain system. Now, one thing you would notice if you drove around Santa Barbara and looked at these catch basins is that they're all very different. They're different in size. They're different in the way they're constructed. We provided you with a few different examples, but I could have probably given you 100 photos with a different looking opening. They're as I said, they're different sizes. One of the photos I provided shows how across the top there's a flat metal bar across the top. That's one design that's been used. Sometimes you'll see horizontal or vertical bars that were placed in those. Generally speaking, those bars were placed into the catch basins to try to block trash. They work well if you've got something really big, but they don't work well for getting most of the trash, the bags of chips and small bottles and candy wrappers and gum wrappers and cigarette butts and things like that. The other thing we see often is at this kind of opening, you'll also have a drop inlet down in the street there. Just a lot of different looks. And one of the things we wanted was a design that could be adaptable for a lot of different types of conditions. So as I mentioned, since 2005, we've been reviewing and evaluating different screen designs from all over the state and all over the country. A lot of communities are installing these or being required to install them. And we've installed several different styles. The Creeks Division has installed several different styles in the Lower West Side and around State Street over the years to kind of pilot test some different designs for their effectiveness under real-world conditions and storms and with the street sweeping program. We've also evaluated the designs that have been used by the City Public Works Department in installing the catch basins. They often use those vertical and horizontal bar designs in Caltrans as well to see how they perform both for trash and debris blocking, but also during storm events. And we had a chance to look at those. What we found generally with the old designs is that have kind of been installed piecemeal over time, is that they're not very effective for the trash and debris removal, partly for the reasons I mentioned. They're not tight enough, so a lot of the smaller trash gets through. They tend to be expensive to maintain. All of those ones that have the vertical bars in them, what happens is you get plastic bags that will wrap around them, or string, or balloons, balloons or balloon string, or even long pieces of grass. And then those have to be, in order to maintain them, you have to go hand pick out all of that trash. And it's just very time-consuming, labor-intensive, and expensive. And they don't work well with the street sweeper trucks, because the sweepers don't get in close enough to pull those kinds of things out of there. They're often recessed further back into the catch basin, and they're not that effective. So in the fall of 2007, we researched all the firms that had some kind of retractable screen that would work for the flooding purpose. We found 4 of them. We invited all of them to come to Santa Barbara and install their design into one catch basin, so we could sort of real-world test everything that was available on the market. And we did that. We left them in place for almost a year, because we ran tests with fire hydrants. Those are the ones that the contractors like to use, because you can blast water directly at the screen, and but they don't function that way in real life. So we wanted to test them under real-world conditions and see what happens over time with trash and things getting stuck to them and so forth. The design that we're proposing today is the one that was the most effective. We made one modification to the original design, in that this was originally a locking design that locks itself closed, and then when a high enough flow of water is coming through it, it moves the tray and unlocks the screen so it can open up. We removed the locking device completely, because we found that it often didn't open, and we didn't want to cause any flooding, and that just the weight of the screen itself and gravity was sufficient to let it push open when we had high flows and come back down when the rain stopped. And because we have street sweeping once a week or once every other week in most neighborhoods now in the city, we don't get a lot of things piling up in front of these screens. They're cleaned up weekly, and we don't have a lot of rain, so that system worked better and was safer for us. We installed 116 of these screens as part of a pilot test of them in the Old Mission Creek neighborhood, which is over on the west side of town, and they've performed very well over the past year, and were very effective. I included a photo that looks like a PowerPoint slide with your packet, this one. And that kind of, I guess it's just kind of a pretty intuitive system. The trash and the leaves and things pile up, and the street sweeper comes by, and they're gone. And we kind of ran these tests, because not having that locking device, we thought maybe the sweeper would just push all the trash down into the catch basin. It didn't. It picked up everything, and there's nothing in the catch basin. We went with a stainless steel design. A lot of the products that are out there are galvanized, or some kind of galvanizing treatment on metal. The stainless steel was just less corrosive and longer lasting, so we felt like it was a better investment for the city. The style of mesh chosen, we chose that perforated design, compared to some of the other ones we tested were an expanded metal design, so you have kind of these diamond shapes. What we found with those larger openings was you get straws and plastic bags and things, they get caught on it, and then it looks terrible, and it's expensive to maintain. So there's with this design, we had no hand cleaning and far fewer snags. So this has been evaluated also by the Public Works Engineering and the Streets divisions for its function, and both of those divisions found it to be an effective and sound design. And then anecdotally, as I mentioned, we installed over 100 of these over in the West Side neighborhood, kind of a mixed-use neighborhood, everything from residential to commercial to busy intersections. There's one installed over at San Andreas and Carrillo. So it's one of the very busy intersections in the in the city, and we have received no negative response or input from the public or any of the neighbors. So now we're planning to expand the program throughout the city. Our next proposed installation location would be up on the Mesa, and we would be preparing to do an installation up there next month. If we get the grant funding that I mentioned earlier, we will move much faster than our original plan, and we would be looking at trying to complete the project by the end of December 2010, so about 18 months from now. And so with that, I'll conclude, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there
Thanks.
any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll have questions from the commission about
Yeah,
this. Mr. Adams?
How vandal-proof are these in your pilot program, Discovery?
You know, that's an excellent question. Anytime you, as you know, you build something that's out in the public right away, it gets beat up and abused. And gosh, I'm almost afraid to say this, but we've been fortunate. We haven't had any vandalism to the screens themselves, or even any kind of spray painting or anything like that. They're pretty solid. You know, it's a very simple design. They're mounted up at the top on a iron rod at the top, and it just is hinged on that and swings back and forth. If somebody were to kick it, it would just swing open and come right back. And so far they've been in for a year, and we haven't had any kind of maintenance issue.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Schallenberger?
A couple of questions. You mentioned when you were creating the design, do you mean just the engineering that went into coming up with the solution, or were there actually designers consulted? In other words, architects or interior designers or somebody that has a more aesthetic eye?
We were focused on the engineering. I mean, our objectives were trash, and one objective I didn't mention is the strength and being able to withstand what happens in the public right away in terms of lug nuts from buses coming up and hitting the curbs. But we did not have any architects on our team, engineering.
Okay, and then the second thing is, will this become the standard? In other words, when future development plans come, and they have a public improvement plan associated with that, will this be the standard from here on out, or how do you envision that?
That's a decision that planning, I think, would make. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but our proposal right now is to install these in all of the public right away. On the map we provided, there are a number of the dots that are either the green dots, which are Caltrans, or private catch basins, which we won't be installing into. But going forward, I don't know if Jaime wants to respond to that.
Well, yeah, Madam Chair, Commission, as with any, improvement, if you have a sidewalk that's going to be installed and involves a catch basin inlet, it would most likely be a requirement that it be installed. So that's what we're seeing in the future. You'd probably see it installed in a new installation.
Any further questions? Are there any other questions, Commission?
One more question. Okay, so in a flood, just so I know how the mechanism works, the force, the gravity force of the flooding water, these things would swing open and stay open,
Right.
as long as there was some kind of pressure going through. You wouldn't manually have to open these.
Correct.
And then just a quick question: how, given the fact there's so many openings, how is this design fitted into those openings? I'm sure there's some variation in some of those openings. What is it about the design that allows flexibility to fit different openings? Because not all concrete is perfect, probably, but
Correct. I mean, the openings are not square, and what we have done is, with the contractor, is to spec the amounts of space that are acceptable for the top and for the bottom of these. Some of them just can't be done. We went out, I think, with 88 that we had the contractor come in up and measure up on the Mesa, and at least 20 of them were not able to be, they weren't able to build a screen to fit it. I mean, if at some point, if the screen is too low, in other words, the opening is only 3 or 4 inches high, to try to hang something in there that's going to swing just doesn't work. So we would just not install something in those types of openings.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll take comments. Yes.
Well, I would really like to see this in a nice Moorish design. But I put this in the same category as the new ticket dispensers in the parking garage. It's a practical use, and I think way overdue to have something like this, so I really support this.
Thank you. Are there any additional or different comments about this item? If not, I think you have the gist of what we think, and thank you very much for a very thorough
Thank you for your time.
presentation and process that you have gone through.
Yeah, thank you
very much.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Next item is the archaeology report for 423 East Coast. Oh, you've got that down.
Yep. Told you I'd help you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Dr. Glassow reviewed the report and concluded that this is the archaeological report, isn't it? Isn't it
Yes.
not? Is it not?
Yes.
Couldn't you just announce that? Yeah,
Yes.
It looked like you were waiting for him to start speaking.
Oh, no, I was just saying hi.
The archaeological investigation supports the report's conclusions and recommendations that, as the proposed project would not have the potential to result in significant impacts on either historic or prehistoric archaeological resources, no mitigation measures are required.
Thank you. Unless there's a presentation, I'll ask for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor? Oh, Mr. Schallenberger has a question.
Clarification on page 11. There are residual impacts. The first paragraph starts off. I think it's just a typo. It says, as the proposed project would have no residual impacts. I think it just is trying to simply say the proposed project would have no residual impacts. It's like it's leading to something else, that there's no follow-up to the as. And
Yes,
I just wanted
correct.
some clarity. Is that just a typo? David's not here, so.
It looks like a strong attempt at a run-on sentence.
I just didn't
But-
know if it's missing something that was intended is all.
We want to protect the historic nature of grammar, and then we just have it perfectly square.
Is that our purview?
Yes. So perhaps Dr. Stone or Mr. Stone will review that sentence himself. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item
Recycle.
is 34 West Victoria Street. Oh, thank you. Yes, Mr. Schallenberger, you'll step down. Looks like we've got a PowerPoint, and perhaps while we are waiting for this, Mr. Jacobs, would you like to speak on it right now or after the presentation? Well, let's have Jake do a little presentation.
just want to give you a little background. This, of course, is the Bonds building. And I've asked the historic structures report. Most of the time is here. The report is under construction, or it's being drafted as we speak. But the issue of concern was the mural. The building, I think we all can pretty much agree, is likely not to be having historic significance. But the mural was designed by Joseph Knowles, a significant local artist who actually attended the Santa Barbara School of the Arts from 1927 through 1930. I've had a number of phone calls from members of the public about the mural, also wondering what was going to happen to it. So basically, there is a structures report, like I said, that's going to be turned into. You'll be seeing that. I believe the structures report will find that the mural is significant, and I believe that to be the cases, which is why I asked for the report in the initially at the beginning of the process. So you can review, even though we don't have the report, you can review the project. You can elect to hold comments or make comments, as you will. And Post Hazeltine is here. They could probably, if you do have specific questions about the mural or its current, the new location that's proposed, they could, brief you a bit on it. And then we'll be seeing the report. Probably by the next meeting, we should have the report available for you so that the package will be complete.
Thank you.
With that, Madam Chair, I pass it on to you.
Thank you. Will you introduce yourselves for the record?
Madam Chair, my name is Brian Cornell. I'm here with my partner, Joe Androlitis. And along with us, as Jake has mentioned, are Tim Hazeltine and Pam Post. They'll be speaking after my presentation, as well as Martha DeGasis from Arcadia Studios, and the property owner, Marge Caparelli, who I'd like to actually just start with a few comments about the property, and then I'll give you a brief presentation. I did want to mention, by the way, Jaime was kind enough to allow us for this concept to present the 11 by 17, and I don't know what you all think of that, but it certainly helps us and for the first review, so we appreciate that consideration. Go ahead, Marge.
For the record, my name is Margaret Caffarelli, and I am the owner of the property at 34 West Victoria Street. I just want to give you a little background, very brief, about our involvement in this property. We bought the property in August of 2009. We bought the property in August of 2008, from Safeway. When they decided to close the store and put the property on the market, we were contacted by a local brokerage firm, and we're very, very excited to purchase the property. I would like to tell you that my company, we are developers of urban infill sustainable projects in the Bay Area. I've lived in Santa Barbara since the early 80s, as well as San Francisco, and we are very committed to creating a very beautiful project that we can all be very proud of in this downtown location, embedding sustainability at every level. So with that, we've put together a great team. I'm going to turn it over to Brian to make the presentation.
Thank you.
So I think I don't need to tell you all that this is probably one of the most historically sacred sites or blocks in Santa Barbara. The Arlington Theater, of course, in the middle, Edwards and Plunkett design that was built started in 1927. But of course, before that was the Arlington Hotel, Mission Revival design, which this photo is taken in 1924, not long before the main part of the hotel was destroyed by earthquake. Of course, historically, it goes back even further than that. William Hollister opened the Arlington Hotel in 1875. Peter Barber designed the main hotel, and then the annex that you see, this is Victoria here. The annex was built in 1887, and of course it was Hispanicated when they built the Mission Revival after in 1909 when the Barber Italianate design was destroyed by a fire. This is the vantage point looking at the corner of Victoria and Chapala. Of course, Marge's site is what we all know of as the Vaughn's site. And this, of course, is a very familiar view to all of us from that corner. Of course, the Safeway was originally a Safeway built in 1959, and for historic context, 1959 gave us absolutely incredible fins and beautiful cars. I'm not sure about the architecture, but the architect of the Safeway, or the owner, who knows, asked Joe Knowles to commission Joe Knowles to do the murals that we know on the side of that today, and Tim and Pam will speak to that, but we are assuming these are historic and need to be preserved on site. That, by the way, was Joe Knowles not long after the murals were completed. So this is just looking at the various vantage points of the site over various days. We'll go here from fog to sun, as we so oftentimes do in Santa Barbara. The murals, of course, along the Victoria side, with the Arlington beyond, the mechanical equipment, the lovely service yard area of the Vaughns, and what truly is a lovely little paseo up to the Arlington behind the Christian Science reading room. This building being built in the 50s in kind of a modern style. Then, of course, the side of the Arlington, which, obviously the architects anticipated that somewhere along the line somebody was going to build something next to the side of this building. The little buildings that front State Street, and of course the back side of them along that paseo. And then finally just going along the Victoria streetscape, the entrance to the city lot, and then of course the sort of Tudor revival church, what was a First Baptist church, I think, built around 1910. And it survived the quake. Of course, the old building department building at the corner, the catacorner. And then there's a lot of nondescript stuff that happens on up Chapala directly across from the site. So let me take you through what we're proposing. Of course, this is the survey of the site, and just to orient you, Victoria, Chapala Street. The property is 1.4 acres. It is entitled to an easement from Chapala that's directly aligned with the middle of the theater. And in fact, from your reviewing the project above us off of Sola, the Arlington Village project, that this area is being maintained, this easement plus additional area on their site being maintained for the theater parking, trucks, that sort of thing. The great thing about Marge and her concept for this site, and really, I will tell you, I feel very fortunate to be involved in a site that has so much going for it. One thing it's got going for is it has an existing market on it, and we have a client who wants to replace that with a new market. It has a vital retail street frontage with Victoria, unlike what Sola is on the block above. So the first component of this, we really have three components to this project. The first component is the rebuilding of the market. We're going to build it a little bit smaller, approximately 15 to 16,000 square feet. And what's really cool about, in thinking about where does the market want to be on this site, and by the way, the market idea could be anything, but Marge's real concept for this is something like the Ferry Building up in San Francisco or Oxbow Market, something where there would be multiple vendors potentially inside this market. The really cool thing is that in 1933, Edwards and Plunkett designed and built a Safeway store on this corner in this location. Now, unfortunately, Tim and Pam have been unable to find anything, any plans or photos of what this building looked like, but it was an Edwards and Plunkett building. It was there from 1933 through to when the Safeway that we know of today was built, and it, of course, was demolished for the parking lot. So it makes a lot of sense historically. This was, of course, what we can only imagine, but this was the market that was up at the corner of Sola and Chapala, where Magellan is today. But that is the spirit that we want to design this kind of in that 1920s, 1930s kind of corner market style. You can see that we've chopped the corner off here, and I'll speak to that later in terms of being the entrance to this market. The second component is building new retail along Victoria. And again, given the blank nature of that, it currently has the murals. And by the way, you'll see we're proposing that the murals be placed on the side of this new market, where, of course, they were originally designed to be on the side of a market anyway, along Chapala. So along Victoria, then, we're engaging that street with new retail. This, of course, was what was there. I'm not proposing to do that. It's interesting, though, if I go back to that site, you can see the original site was clearly far above the grade of Victoria, so it was cut down significantly when that market was built. But we envision this, what's on the other side of Victoria really is just a lovely building. 1- and 2-story kind of character makes a lot of sense. And then the third component of this is the residential. We are proposing 38 units, and it's in the back portion of the site. And this we really want to be truly in the spirit of Andalusian, Pueblos Blancos kind of villages. You think about what the Arlington Theater is, even romantically and stylistically in terms of the interior. It's all about that Spanish village feel. And so the pattern of this, we believe, is very important to reflect that. This is a little village, Parauta, that is near Ronda, and you know how the roofs of the buildings and follow the traditional patterns of the topography or the circulation, and you have the undulation of the roofs. You have this wonderful character, streetscapes within the little village, in a very compact, dense kind of a pattern. So that's what makes up the project. Now, of course, we have to park it, and what we're doing is parking it entirely underground. We're gaining access from that easement down a ramp to first a level of commercial parking for the commercial portion of the project, and then down an additional level to, if I can get this to go, to the residential portion, which is down lower. We're also holding the parking structure back so we create Mother Earth for planting in certain areas, and in fact, since submitting this, we're going to eliminate some of the parking and add to it some additional landscape areas. In other words, where there's actual ground below trees, which is really going to help. A quick section through that. You can see how the two parking levels step to follow grade. So the higher level is in relationship to the Arlington Theater as the first ramp, and then it will be a private section, a ramp, then down to the lower garage, which will be exclusively for the residential. We placed a hypothetical 40-foot line here. It's very important to us that these roofs modulate to create that village character, and so some of the roofs, as we have shown them, exceed that potential 40-foot limit at this time, and we think it's going to be important, as I said, to be able to modulate that. Explaining the plan very quickly, I've already talked about the commercial. There are 12 units on the first floor along with a private residential lobby, and then some amenities. Marge has a great idea to provide guest rooms for the residents because these are small units. Generally speaking, our units are between 1,600 and 1,800 square feet, so guests of the folks who live here can actually stay in these what will be small kind of guest room type hotel room spaces, and then there'll also be a fitness room at the first floor. At the second floor, the big idea here is we're going to commit the roof of this market to be a green roof from both a sustainability standpoint, but to provide the on-grade open space for the residents. So we're actually putting another amenity up here, which is called a club room. The idea of this is that residents can rent this out for a party. It'll be a dining room and kitchen and living room space, and then also opens out onto that green roof. We have 16 units that are up here at the second floor, and then at the third floor we have 10 units, and you can see we've carved the third floor back, particularly in these areas, to provide very important views back to the Arlington. And that's the roof plan, which sort of articulates that village character. These are bird's eye views of the project, which I think give a real good sense of how it sits on this parcel. This, of course, from State Street, looking back. This view from Chapala, looking down onto the market roof in the back of the Arlington. And looking more straight on, which you can see now the incorporation of those murals into the side of these buildings. Now, you'll see on some of these little sketches, by the way, we don't have windows. This is really massing studies, so fenestrations and things we haven't worked out, but we have attempted to place the murals here on the side of the building to give you a sense of how they will work. This shows the scale and the livelihood of the street frontage on Victoria, and then the elevation as it would be perceived along that Paseo up to the entrance to the Arlington. A few quick 3D views to visualize the project. This, of course, from that corner. Now, since we've submitted the project, we've developed this idea of the green roof, and we're showing trees up on the green roof. So I think we have crepe myrtles and olives up there, so I want you to comment on this. Obviously, trees up there somewhat obscure the view of the Arlington, but we think these would be really nice features and very important to the livelihood of that rooftop garden. We also, as we've looked at this, feel that this market is a little bit tall in terms of its scale, so we think that probably doing something like this where we lower it in the front, which helps open up more vistas to the Arlington, would be good, and we'd appreciate your comments on this. Obviously, with the murals, kind of looking at this view, in some respects, the height of the building, of this retail building, will be governed a little bit by the height of these existing murals. And here again, I'm alluding to a pattern as far as this market or architecture, but there's a lot of different ways that the ultimate detailing of this could go. But we definitely believe these murals should be placed similarly the way they are now, with reusing the stone that currently serves as their base. Looking kind of east down Chapala, it shows that the market has a fairly low scale because it's kind of digging into the site here, and we'll have some sort of a, trust me, lovely designed service area along here, because of course this is the driveway entrance to our site, but this shows how much the back of the Arlington will be kept open and visible. Looking from Victoria, this illustrates the streetscape, the sense of the 1- and 2-story character, which is very important, and still being able to very, very clearly see the Arlington. And when you look at these images, we actually believe that this helps in the perception of the Arlington. Now you've got this horrible big service yard, and you see a lot of the Arlington. But when you begin to place this nicely scaled architecture in front of it, it actually enhances it. It's almost like the church in the middle of the town, that was meant to be surrounded by other buildings. The side of the Arlington and how that space looks here, I haven't really mentioned it, but we want to enhance this space as a real paseo, going back towards Chapala, and it'll connect with our main entrance to the project. Those, by the way, aren't power poles. Those are meant to be Washingtonia robusta, but it doesn't look that way, does it? I know. The computer just doesn't draw trees too well. And then this, of course, this is the main entrance to the store, to the market, and back into the residential lobby area. So this is very important. We love the way that this kind of faces back towards State and Victoria. I should mention here, too, let me go back. You'll see in the landscape plan that Martha is proposing a sycamore in this area, and you'll want to comment on that. We see the opportunity to introduce skyline trees here, but obviously those may have view impacts on the Arlington. Looking at the other side of that paseo, that new paseo along the Arlington Theater, and then back towards that entrance off of Victoria. And this really shows how, in fact, this was really Tim and Pam's ideas. When we brought this building square, it blocked a lot more of the Arlington, even as one story. So by clipping that entrance back at a corner like that, it really helps open up this vantage point of the tower. So that concludes my presentation. I thought Martha could touch base on the planting very quickly, and then I'd like Tim and Pam, as I mentioned, to just mention some of their key findings and as quickly as we can. Thank you.
I wish you would, because I will be starting to run late.
Okay, I'll
Thank
be
you.
brief. We're discussing along Victoria Street this pretty equal spacing of a deciduous canopy tree, and we have a few choices on the plan that you can look at. A medium scale tree, and then on Chapala Street an evergreen tree, so there would be something like the Virginia oak that we have further up the street by Arriaga Street. On the green roof, the components here, we've got some crepe myrtles again, as Brian mentioned, and a couple olive trees or Metrosideros or New Zealand Christmas trees. And then we have olive trees or some sort of evergreen Mediterranean tree at the pedestrian entry to the residential component. Some other characteristic trees along the corner here, acacia pendula and can't quite remember what we proposed there, another weeping tree. And then along the paseo here, some Washingtonia robusta trees, some Phoenix robellini, and Trachycarpus palms. So you get a good vertical component there for the paseo effect. A lot of pottery and so on in the interior courtyards. And then, as Brian mentioned, the sycamore tree for the main skyline feature tree in that courtyard. Up at the corner here, we've got some more skyline trees. We're proposing at this point the Eucalyptus citriodora or the lemon gum. So good tree canopy there, and most of the interior space is being augmented with pottery planting, vines, and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Joe, you want to answer?
Pamela Post, Post Hazeltine Associates, one of the authors of the Historic Structures Report, which you'll be seeing shortly.
And Tim Hazeltine, Post Hazeltine Associates. I just wanted to, I guess, unless just give a short synopsis.
Your report.
Yeah.
So
if you had any questions about the mural at this point, that's the primary reason that we're
thank you.
We're up here.
I think that's great you
Okay.
came. If there are, perhaps we'll wait for questions then. If there will be any questions regarding,
Madam Chair?
yes.
While we've got Post Hazeltine, perhaps this would be a good time for them to just briefly touch on the reorientation in the mural and why that would be not a negative impact historically.
Oh,
All right.
okay. Yes, I'd like to comment at that. As you know, the mural is on West Victoria Street, and it's proposed that we move to Chapala. When we wrote the report, the significance of the Vons was essentially the murals. The market found had met none of the criteria. So it was important that we felt that the murals be preserved, but we didn't feel it was necessary that they be preserved in situ, as long as they were preserved and reused on site. And because the market in the proposed project is moved, closer to Chapala, we thought that that kind of viewscape would be an excellent location for the murals. In actuality, probably more people will see it going up Chapala than the way it is viewed now on Victoria. So it means our primary concern was that the murals be saved and reused, and we felt it was appropriate, as long as they were used on site, that they could be used in another location. And I just want to speak just briefly, if I can, about the project in relation to the historic character and architecture of the Arlington, of course, which is the primary focus and interest in regard to the project's impact to that resource. As the Arlington was designed as by Everetts and Plunkett, completed just before the Depression, and designed essentially as a Basilican church, with the intent that there eventually would be commercial structures that would be added to it along West Sola Street. Because of the Depression, of course, that did not happen, and eventually it was turned into a parking lot. So we, when looking at this project, we felt that it's appropriate, as in conjunction with that sort of historic character of a Basilican church in a medieval village in Europe, whether it's Spain or France or other parts of Europe. It was very and very common to find the church as the locus of the town, with surrounded very closely by both commercial and residential structures, and fashioned in a rather picturesque fashion. So,
And just to add to that, the report is going to focus the analysis of impacts on three areas. One is the impacts to the mural from its relocation. The other is the impacts to the setting and sightlines, the major sightlines of the Arlington Theater. The third will be an evaluation of cumulative project impacts that would result from the development of this project, as well as the project on the adjacent parcel, and a proposed project on the Magellan site over on Sola and Chapala. So the report's going to have that focus. We're looking at it conceptually as what defining the significant sightlines towards the Arlington from public thoroughfares as far as the types of setting impacts that could result from a project on this parcel. And as Pam noted, the murals themselves are significant because of their status as a artwork. And so we feel that moving them to Chapala in a way that will preserve them intact in their existing configuration as well as their existing chronological arrangement would preserve their historic character and would meet the standards.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for public comment, and I believe I do have one public comment.
Thank you, Kellen DeForest. I want to thank Mr. Cornell for a better-looking project than the Arlington Village project. I think maybe he's learned a lesson from that project, or he does a better job. These two projects should be coordinated to provide a unity in design, which was originally envisioned by Mr. Plunkett when he built the Arlington in the first place. At least I believe that was envisioned. It is very important that the monumentality of the Arlington be retained, and I don't know these structures that these condo structures in back of the storefronts on Victoria may, at least at first glance, seem to be a little too tall. And I also would like to see a little as with the building, the State Street facade, the stores on State Street, they go in and out in some places, and I would like more articulation on Victoria Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I'm going to ask for questions from the Commission for any one of the applicant team. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have questions.
Murray?
I would like the team to really talk about the setbacks and what they are, they're envisioned to be. I also would really like to have the team assured that they have read the compatibility guidelines and how you answer all those questions. So that I will be looking for that in the long run as we go. But and I'm also very glad that the post-Hazeltine team is going to look at the overall impacts from all around that it's just been lacking in the other project, and we're going to be really looking to that. In our guidelines, it says that in addition to the courthouse, this is the most important thing. So I just want you to go over this and show where are the setbacks and how do you see this as a massing, enhancing the Arlington.
Okay, very briefly, because I know I've taken too much time, but I do want to explain that we are setting the buildings along Victoria back. I showed you that landscape area, so we're pulling the parking garage back, and we basically vary that setback in and out. I think our minimum is 3 feet, and we're out to 6 feet, but we have the ability to vary those buildings, and that's the spirit of the buildings across the street. You know, they have those lovely little planters in front of them, like where, you know, Ole de Limon and those kind of buildings are. Along the Paseo up to the Arlington, we likewise are setting the buildings back. We've got a setback for landscape here, I think, of 10 feet, and then it varies because we have kind of undulating facades along here, but we have planting in the ground all along here. We've pulled the parking garage back 6 feet along the property line at the Arlington so we can plant that, and we have at this point a combination, I think, of palms, and I think there's some olives in that area, and that's certainly, we're open to your ideas. As you know, there's a couple of olives there now, so it seems like a nice tree. We're setting back 4 feet approximately along Chapala so we can have that same kind of a planter detail that exists now along the murals that are on Victoria. So we're creating those planting setbacks all the way around. In terms of the guidelines, I think I've already demonstrated to you or illustrated, I hope, the massing of the project, which we've worked very hard on, having 1 and 2 stories along Victoria, 1 story along Chapala, and then the higher 3-story masses are here in the back. But more importantly, I think, is just the creation, or really the rebirthing of these potential paseos in this location, instead of looking down on that trash area. They'll have buildings, and likewise doing something here in conjunction with the Arlington owners to really engage and open up this, which then will connect back to Victoria and or Chapala. So,
thank you. Okay, any further questions? Are there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Curtis.
I have a question for the landscape architect.
Mr. Adams, Mr. Curtis has the floor.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
The agenda indicates that there are some modifications to zoning standards that are requested with respect to interior yard setbacks. And I think the commissioners also received an email regarding concern about whether parking standards were going to be adhered to or not. So my questions are, first, do you intend to design a project that will comply with the current zoning standards with respect to parking, or will you be requesting?
No, we're going to park at 2 ordinance, and the only real issue relative to the parking is we're proposing a few extra spaces, 3 or so,
3 to 5.
3 to 5 for car share.
Car sharing.
So that we could have the ability for residents to use car share vehicles here. But otherwise, we're going to park exactly to ordinance, which is 1 space per residential unit and 1 per 500 for the commercial, minus whatever the zone of benefit here, which I think is 20%.
And the car share is not exclusively for the residents. It will be, if you join FlexCar, you can come and take a car out of the garage and drive it wherever you want to go. That speaks to our commitment to the sustainability, embedding sustainability at every level in this project.
As far as mods, no. I think that has to do with the staff had the impression that the residential was completely detached from the commercial, and under those circumstances, if this was strictly residential, it would have to comply with the R3, R4 setbacks. But because it is connected to the commercial via bridges and building elements, those setbacks will not be enforced, so it won't require a mod from that standpoint.
So the agenda is not correct. You will not be requesting.
At this point, we certainly hope not. The caveat here is, for instance, there's some question about whether we'll have to pursue a mod for our open space if we put the open space on the roof of the market building, for instance. So there could be some minor modifications based on, decisions of whether that would be a mod or not by staff. But we certainly would prefer not to have any mods. We haven't designed any into them that we know of, other than that rooftop question.
One other question. The commercial building along Victoria, what is the height of that structure?
Well, it's 2 stories. The first level, I mentioned to you how the parking structure steps. So we actually, the level at Victoria, the floor level at Victoria is actually 6 feet below the level of the ground where the residence will be. So that's that will result then in a ceiling height at the commercial area of about 15 feet for those stores, and then we'll have residential units on top of those with 9-foot plates, so it'll be in the 20, 24, 25-foot range.
To the
Is that right?
to the eve.
Yeah.
To the eave.
To
Yeah,
the
that's
eve.
not the height of the building.
So add another
So,
4
yeah,
feet.
another 4
for
feet, so 29,
29
28
feet to the ridge.
Okay. Mr. Curtis, any further questions? Mr. Adams?
Yeah. The green roof feature. What kind of green roof? What's the program for the green roof?
The program on the green roof, besides the raised planters that are holding the trees, is a type of tray system that would have sedum and other mixed perennial type plants, yarrows, things like that.
As an edge treatment or field treatment?
It's
or?
a field treatment. We also have a little turf area that's for use in conjunction with the clubhouse component. So the areas of the green roof that are on the plan that you can see are depicted kind of in the darker green would be the mixed sedums and succulents, that kind of a standard green roof palette. There's also another green roof component over to the northeast there, you can see. So, and then we have
right,
a little,
in that corner. Okay.
And then we have a little turf also.
And then something that may not be clear on the plan is that this area in the middle is a raised kind of transom area to give light into the market.
Yeah, there's a clerestory element there, and then on
I
top
see.
of that, we're green again.
How tall is that transom?
It's like 4 feet.
3 or 4 feet.
Mm-hmm. To allow natural light.
To allow
through.
natural light into the market.
And,
This is
and ventilation.
This project, Marge's goal is to get at least LEED Gold or LEED Platinum on this project. So we're trying to incorporate as much sustainability into this.
And I will tell you
proposal.
that in this case, this is not just blowing hot air. March has written this into our contract to achieve that level of sustainability, that LEED certification.
And then the other question I have is, I haven't spent a lot of time with the landscape plan, but are you, conceptually anyway, are you going to be utilizing the Great Canary Island date palm anywhere, or was that out of the palette at this point?
That we have not proposed to transplant on site, so I'm sure we'll have it harvested and used elsewhere. But
I see.
we're not planning
but
on
right now,
incorporating
that's
it.
not part of your plant palette.
Unfortunately, it's somewhat of a stunted specimen, and so we really, in talking with Arcadia, I think they felt that it probably wasn't a good specimen to try to.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to know what was included in the palette. I know
Right.
olives, sycamores.
Yeah, and in addition, we've got some olive trees existing that, too, we will harvest and use elsewhere, but we're not planning to use
Okay.
them on site.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? If not, Shay?
The green roof area, how much of that is usable space?
The green roof adjacent to the clubhouse in
Yeah, this is
that
what
area,
I'm
yeah.
speaking
The lawn area that you can see closest to the Chapala Street frontage is going to be the usable roof area. Then in addition to that, we've got sort of walkways, patios, and so on that will all be usable.
And I should mention those walkways and patios will essentially be a green roof because those will all be that'll be permeable paving that'll be sitting in this system of containers that Martha mentioned, and so it actually aids in the rainwater.
Well, that I applaud, definitely. Just you answered my question, that's all.
Any further questions from the commissioners?
I do have one.
Mr. Curtis.
The market building, what is the height? Does it have multiple levels inside, or is it just one level?
No, it'll just be one level with about a 16-foot height ceiling. No.
And then if you look at the exterior elevations, the height's kind of dictated by the mural, because as Chapala slopes down, that mural is a certain height, and we're trying to keep it all at one level, so it gets higher as you come down towards Victoria.
And just very briefly related to that, at the end of the market, we're going to be digging into the site. So the finished floor of the market, the grade here is at about 86, and this is about 89, and this is going to be up at 94, which is what the elevation is up along the Arlington. So we're in the ground here. What we're going to do is step up to a service area. There'll be a freight elevator at the end of the market, and then that'll give access to the dumpsters and other equipment that we're going to house back here in this fenced-in area, which, as I mentioned, we haven't really designed, but it's going to have to be beautifully designed. Absolutely, exactly.
Any further questions? I have a minor question. What is the height of the existing Bonds building?
I'm not certain. I'll have to check. I would guess it's only 24 feet at the most, probably. Yeah.
Okay. If you will.
Yeah.
I believe Mr. Jacobus has something to add or.
I had one. It's hard to tell. It seems to me that when you walk on this time, I can have the microphone, so they don't yell at me.
Yes.
This has to do with something mural against graffiti. It seems to me that, and I can't really tell from the picture, but I remember it being further back from the street than it appears in the new Chapala Street elevation.
No, we've made it so it's the same relationship to the property line
to the sidewalk
as it is on Victoria.
Okay.
So, and maybe we'll use the same juniper or whatever it is. No. Okay, never mind. Boy, did you see the look I just got? No juniper.
Anything further, Mr.
No, so apparently it's not getting any closer to the street than it was. That's all my concern was about graffiti. So.
And we are talking about reusing all of the stone. There's actually beautiful stonework on this, and we're going to reuse all of that throughout the project.
Any further questions from the commissioners? I will take comments now from the commissioners. We are running late, so please be concise. Please do not be repetitive. And let's start. Who would like to start? Somebody start.
Madam Chair.
Yes?
This is highly irregular, but I would want to point out one thing that I really like about this project. The windows are a much smaller scale. There's a lot more white stucco that we're seeing in these buildings. They match more closely with the older style 20s buildings than we saw on other projects where there's a lot of window area. So I don't know if that's intentional at this point, but it's something that I'd like the architect to maybe consider keeping as one of the features, because that's one of the main features when they talk about the Spanish colonial revival style, are the large areas of white stucco that show on the sides of the buildings, giving the feeling of mass and real thick walls. And we tend to lose that a lot in these residential projects because they put large days in type windows on them, and that you lose that effect. So the way it looks now, it really has a nice effect. Just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you. Now, which of the commissioners would like to start? Thank you.
I'm having some trouble with the market building, not the side with the mural on it, but the other side fitting into our ordinance. It seems the size of the windows and so forth are a little large for what we usually approve. I like your
Victoria
little
Street elevation?
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
And near the entrance. And I'm also having problems with the so much third story.
Thank you.
I'm not going to go into details. Okay?
It's Ms. Murray? No. He's not jumping forward. Ms. Murray.
No, I can make some comments.
Okay, Mr. Curtis.
If you want to go down.
Okay.
There's some things that I like about the project first. I like the idea of the green roof and the fact that your intent is to comply with all or most all of the zoning standards, including parking. I think is good. The massing in general, I think, is also good in the sense that the buildings are lower along the streets and then step up toward the rear of the site, therefore by allowing the possibility, I think, of better views up to the top of the Arlington Theater building from, say, across the street or from other vantage points a little bit more distant from the site. The areas where I would like to see maybe some consideration of changes would be at the Paseo that's behind the Christian Science Center there, when that Paseo reaches the edge of the theater building, I would prefer to see a little bit of ground level open space at that area, like a small courtyard at that area, because the tower element of the Arlington is located very near that location, and I think just giving some significance to that and the possibility as you're walking in the Paseo to look up close, at a close vantage point to the tower and the spire might be good, and also just have a little bit more green space at the ground level.
Are you talking about here? Is that where you're talking about? In this corner?
Let me get oriented on this.
This is Victoria.
Okay.
This is the Paseo. This is the Arlington.
Come around.
Whoops.
I think it's the
This is
the Paseo from
this is the
Victoria to
Paseo.
Solo.
Referring to
This area. Okay. That's
Oh.
right. Yeah. Okay.
A little bit of an open courtyard. I'm not saying a huge one, but at least some announcement that's an important location right there because of being near the tower and the spire. Likewise, one of the concerns that was expressed on the other building was maintaining some view to the rear of the Arlington. And if there's some way of creating a little bit more view, the rear entryway into the Arlington is ornate and very large in scale, and to maintain some view along Chapala Street and that's a one-way street going up. I'm not sure what direction you would call that there, but as you're driving up, if there's some way of opening up a little bit more view into the rear of the Arlington at that vantage point, I think that would be desirable. With regard to the landscaping, I'm not so certain about the idea of skyline street trees there because of the interference with the views of the Arlington itself. Because of the nature of the site plan of the Arlington, you really only get distant views of it except for little bits and pieces, and so to the extent that you have large skyline trees there, I think trees that have foliage are very good, but more down at street level, 15, 20 foot high trees from my point of view would be more appealing there, combined perhaps with palms or some other kind of approach. But overall, I think it has many commendable features to the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Mr. Murray? Sharp?
Madam Chair, briefly, I'm having trouble. I have to question whether or not replicating more or less the existing Safeway market, which would never be approved today in the district. And replicating, I know the murals are there and so forth, but to merely use that as a reason to replicate, as I said, what is there, I really am having trouble with. Also, I think we need more variation in the building frontages from the back of the sidewalk, more landscaping, and really see a value in a complete elevation all the way from Victoria to Sola of this project with the proposed project to the north to try and get a total streetscape as to what those two projects are going to be, with the Arlington being the backdrop in the more or less the center of the block.
Thank you.
That's it.
Ms. Murray?
In addition to all the concerns that have been raised, I am concerned about the density of the site because the Arlington, as I mentioned before, is like the courthouse. The reason why the courthouse works is because it's got the green, it's got the big yard and so forth. And my concern is that although I really appreciate that you have 1 and 2 stories, there's back buildings here, the residential buildings. They look great on this picture, but I do not have the sense that they are going to look like this. I think the density bothers me. The height of some of those things, if there's a variation of maybe 1 and 2 stories of some of those units, I would like to see that. I also would like to see some sense of openness, feeling of openness that you're just not crowding all these things around the Arlington. It's not. You do know the sense of this is the basilica in the middle, and we are trying to put these things. It's just that when I look at this, it's just too much program for this area. The market. To me, it's just one big rectangular building. The shape of it, perhaps, is the thing that, as you look up and you're coming up and you're looking at the Arlington from Chapala, there is that great sense of the monumental part about it. And I just don't get the feeling that the market is going to enhance that. Maybe it's because of its style or something about it that doesn't quite work with me at this moment. I don't know whether it needs to be broken up in some kind of way. It's just that when I look at it, it just seems so different, like what Mr. Sharp was saying. There's sort of a Safeway part about it, and then the rest of it. I just do appreciate the 2 stories because I really see the site, and I'm going to continue to say that is the reason why the State Street site really works is because the 1 and 2 story variations. And this is going to be 2 and 3 stories. But I just really believe that there is a way you can make it so it doesn't look so dense. You can hide the density whatever way you make it. I just feel the back area here is too dense, and the market just needs a little something. Let's see. I do appreciate the care for the landscaping. I'm not sold on the roof garden. I don't know how that will sit as far as the garden is great, but it shouldn't take away from the monumentality of the Arlington. And as you see, there was another project earlier that was by Sweeney and Henry Lenny for the others property from the past. It never got through. But they had some really great way of how you have these palm trees and things where it actually framed that side of the Arlington really well. And I guess I would like to see something like that in the back where you could see roof lines, but you also see maybe thin palm tree or something that doesn't take away from the Arlington, but rather enhances it. That's it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Fermina, if you could just comment on the orientation of the mural. I'm assuming you're okay with it because you haven't mentioned it, but I'd like to get that issue solved.
I have to look at the report,
okay.
And because I'm going to be really looking at that report closely and looking at the mural from all points of view, not just the market, not just preserving it, and it's just going to need a lot of analysis, I think, on everyone's part. Okay, so I don't want to. And they are going to do a good job. I know they know how we feel. They know this is an important landmark, and we are all going to be looking at it.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Okay, first of all, I think that there's some real creativity going on here. I love the fact that you're going to restore the mural, and I love your green approach too. A real green roof maybe could really work. However, just a couple of things to pay attention to. I think that the corner market just feels very contemporary to me. It feels like a contemporary box. I think that market needs to be revisited for some kind of modulation. It makes me feel that it just fills up every square inch of the site. I think we need some better landscape relief at that market building. A specific comment about the landscape palette. I think, and I'm not saying everywhere, but I think the Canary Island date pine needs to be incorporated in a couple of key spots. And just for the sake of history, I'm well aware of the landscaping at the Arlington Hotel. They had eucalyptus, which I see you've incorporated, which is great. But what I don't see in this palette is the Canary Island date palm as a framing device, as a magnificent sort of contrast to the beauty of the Arlington. So I would, and I do like the use of the sycamore where you have it. That's a tree you can see around, and in winter it allows views. So that's not bad. I really hear the point. There may be too many skyline trees. I don't think the project needs to be overloaded with skyline trees. However, the project does need, on all the exterior edges, it needs softening with the scale of an olive tree or the Metrosideros type of thing. It needs more softening around the edges. That all the exterior seem like the lines are too straight. The architecture needs to modulate better. We need a little bit more landscaping, and we really need softening. And where I find softening is really needed, and I know this is conceptual now, but it's in the middle of the paseos, and here it just feels barren.
No, we haven't. I mean, this is concept.
It's a concept, but I'm just saying, as you develop this project, we're going to be looking for slight softening of walls. They don't have to be skyline trees. They need to be soft, very compatible plants, for that are found within the EPV. That being said, I find the shape of the paseos to be very creative. I so appreciate the mural, saving the mural in a proper fashion. It demands more analysis, but that's going to be a great feature. And so those are my comments at this time. But I feel that the corner building really needs work. It makes me feel that this site is just getting too crowded.
Thank you. Mr. Peugeot?
Madam Chair, I think this is a good project. It brings a lot of good things to the community. The salient features are the underground parking, the mixed-use character of the building, the commercial aspect on Victoria, and its paseos and the articulation of the architecture. On the other hand, I would say that this project still needs quite some work. I agree with the comments made on the corner building. I think that is the part where this project could use some help. Whereas on Victoria Street, it has a nice pedestrian interaction. It has commercial spaces that over the design process it will be articulated, and I can see some in and outs and places for coffee shops and so forth. And the concept of eyes on the streets, maybe there's some live work activity on top of those workspaces on Victoria, because I think eyes on the street is always a positive thing. Where it has all of that things going on Victoria, all of that is missing on Chapala. On Chapala is dedicated to the murals. And I agree with the comments that, it just doesn't do a lot for the pedestrian on Chapala. I'm not sure if the murals have to be on Chapala, or if there's another place in the project that could also receive them, that could be facing some other place. I would like to see, besides the market, some other elements, maybe on one of the two ends, at the beginning of the end, some of the smaller spaces that you see some else on Chapala, like queues or some other little hole in the wall, a 20-foot wide space that breaks the scale of the major building. We do see the small spaces that articulate the pedestrian experience as one walks down Chapala Street. I don't think that the project has too high of a density. I'm surprised how low density it is. I disagree with that respectfully. I think this is a good site. I also disagree with the comment on the large trees. I don't think there's any skyline tree that will ever block the Arlington. I don't think it's possible.
Thank you.
I do agree with also the style of the architecture. I believe the style of the market it may not be as appropriate as it should be. I think I see some Art Deco influence, and I also see these large glass areas. I don't think they help that much. I'm not sure if they bring the light that you need. Usually, these kind of big glass surfaces do not work well in markets, at least in my experience. But anyways, it's a mixed... I think the program is good. I don't think it's articulated to its best at this point yet.
Thank you. I know you take copious notes and will continue to take notes. I'm going to try and summarize the comments, which are not actually that diverse. With our guidelines, we are obligated to look at urban design guidelines as well for the city. And so you heard those. Your project is doing very well in terms of being within the overarching guidelines of the general plan in terms of bowing to sustainability, your underground parking, your green roof, your mixed-use character, and in general your articulation of buildings, your compliance with zoning, and your in general stepping of massing and bulk and scale. There's appreciation for your paseos and pedestrian experience, and the fact that you are and have obviously been very sensitive in paying attention to the history of the site and the building to which you are adjacent. In terms of the mass, bulk, and scale and the compatibility guidelines, there is some concern on this commission regarding the density. Not everyone agrees with this. There is concern regarding the proportion of three-story buildings, although you have stepped it back. And there is more general concern regarding the market building. This seems to be the lightning rod for a number of opinions. There's concern regarding the style, the bulk, the scale, the address of its building to the street, and large glass surfaces and its style. Regarding the landscape, there is appreciation for the general landscape palette that you have used. There is some suggestion that you look at incorporating Canary Island date palms, that you need some softening around the edges, and regarding your use of skyline trees, you've heard there's a little bit of dissension regarding that, and in terms of that, there has been some concern regarding distant views to the Arlington. It is not just the immediate views and you're massing up against it, but distant views from around the city. This is a very important building, and obviously we're very sensitive about it. I will look for a motion.
Can I get just a little clarification?
Yes, clarification.
On the market, first of all, obviously this is concept, and we didn't want to go too far stylistically, so I appreciate the concerns. The notion here, I was a little surprised at Commissioner Sharp's comment about replicating Vaughn's, because I certainly never imagined that what we were doing here was replicating Vaughn's, other than using this as a backdrop for the murals. I will tell you that we thought very seriously about the murals here and the murals along here, and felt that we were actually hiding them from the community by doing that, and that really left me one other place. So I would like clarification on or consensus on the location of the murals. Is the board completely split on this? Does the board feel that the location is a good one that we should continue to pursue? Because I've got real mixed messages on that.
I think we wanted to see the HSR
Report.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll go with.
But I just want to say you have flexibility to move the murals, and there's not only one place for the murals.
Okay.
And I think the murals could lend themselves very nicely to a pedestrian experience. At least that's my feeling.
I would just like to make one quick comment, and that is that we discussed this at great length with Pam and Tim, and the pedestrian experience on Victoria Street. My desire was to remove all of the truck traffic from Victoria Street to really bring it back to a pedestrian experience, and really you don't see those murals on Victoria Street, and driving up Chapala Street you would see them. And they were, very, I think, they've supported that very much.
Okay, well, we'll get the report, but
Yeah.
the notion of this is not to replicate the Vaughns, but to put a building that would be of the character that Edwards and Plunkett put on this corner in 1933. Is that... Well,
Are you looking for clarification when you're making comments?
No, I'm looking for, is that the direction? I never imagined that I was creating the finished architecture here for you to look at. It really is, again, this is concept and massing. So does that make sense to all of you that we're looking at that genre, that period of markets that were on corners built in the 20s and 30s, if we look back to those kind of...
Yeah, but those corners will have access the street and perhaps several doors.
Well, not all of them. I showed you the A and P.
This is not a dialogue going on. Okay, I think the question I heard you just say I thought was addressed by everyone who had comments about the market. The market comments were actually pretty specific for this level of presentation.
Okay.
So I would like a motion.
I want to add one more comment. And all your comments were great, Madam Chair. But the one comment is, I really appreciate the effort to attempt a real green roof. I don't think we've seen a real green roof. Maybe not exactly in this schematic, but a sizable or workable green roof with the succulents in the whatever. I think that green aspect of a green roof is a great idea, and this could be worked in. I don't know. I just commend that effort.
Madam Chair, that was in my beginning comments. Yes?
I would be happy to make a motion
Thank you.
to continue with those comments. How long would you want, Brian?
Well, I would say I'm not sure when Jake's going to be done with the report, but if we could continue it to the same time when the report will be back on the agenda.
I would say realistically, if you could go out 4 weeks, we know we can meet that deadline.
Just so
2
that
weeks
we're
might
back
be.
here
might be
when.
4
tight.
weeks in.
Yeah, so we can respond to your comments and you can see the report.
Good.
And take a look at the Arlington Garage Historic Structures Report when you get a chance. I'll try and remember to pull it for you. Call me. I think it's got the type of architectural features that they're talking about for this storefront.
Good.
Do I have a second for this motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion
I'm
carries.
sorry we ran over.
It's all right, we're running late. You did very well given what I expected. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.